Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill. Today, we are super excited. So, it's just me today. Jill is actually on vacation. So, you have me and a very special guest, Larry Keener. And before we introduce him, I would love to hear where you are listening from and joining us from. So please add in the comments where you're listening from. And, we always talk about the weather. Right now, I'm traveling. I'm actually in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm here for about 24 hours, and I was here for the North American Meat Institute conference. So if you are at the conference, and you're listening to this on replay, please put the hashtag replay and hello because you saw me about an hour or so ago. But I'm in Kansas City and the weather is actually really nice. And for the people that are living in the north, I think you have probably a couple more weeks of nice weather. Larry, I know you are in Seattle, so I'm hoping you guys have a couple more weeks of nice weather as well, or is it rainy there?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce here does a great job of convincing folks that it rains here perpetually.
that's
But the fact of the matter, it doesn't. So we're enjoying beautiful weather right now. This morning it's about 72 degrees.
ooh,
Maybe you'll get 80 today, which is high for us.
yeah.
But it's a gorgeous morning here in Seattle.
That is awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. So, yes, please put where you are listening from. Welcome, Robert. Welcome, Kerrigan from the Caribbean. That's awesome. We're glad you are listening in. And if this is your first time joining Real Talk Food Safety, I am Tia, and myself and Jill, who is listening in. Hello, Jill. We focus on developing and growing technical leaders in teams, helping organizations and leaders like yourself build sustainable food safety and quality cultures in the food and beverage industry. So we go live every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time to talk about relevant topics in food safety that can help you think about how to lead differently and how to build your team members and really get a grasp around this buzzword of food safety culture. And every now and then we do have a guest, and I want Larry to introduce himself, but this whole concept of food safety culture and where we've been in food safety is really relevant to today's conversation. And I won't give it all the way away until Larry introduces himself, but we are excited to have Larry on the show and really share his perspective around how food safety has changed over the years. And one thing that we're really hoping that you all take from this conversation is the progress that has been made in food safety, and then where we need to start thinking to in the future, to continue to build on that progress and to continue to strengthen our cultures. So, without further ado, Larry, I will turn it over to you and just introduce yourself and let us know what led you to food safety and what's kind of kept you here.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tia and Jill, for the invitation to join you folks on Real Talk Food Safety. It's an honor to be able to engage with you. I think the reason I'm here is because I'm an old man. and to put a fine point on that, I'm an old man who's been doing food safety for a very long time. I first started working well, it wasn't, and this will be part of the conversation. It really wasn't called food safety when I first started back in the 70s, working for the National Food Processors Association as a research microbiologist. Um, I worked for the trade association. I worked for industry as the director of product safety and regulatory affairs at Unilever for a number of years. And back in 1996, I left the corporate life to start my own consulting enterprise. And that uh, was predicated on my understanding the marketplace and seeing a paucity of skills related to food safety. So I built a business plan that focused at medium to small size enterprises to help them out with this thing called food safety, and that's an interesting conversation in and of itself. What the hell is food safety?
Right, right.
But that's kind of a bit about me. I've I've taken the pains to sit down and write. I've probably got 100 papers published, 10 book chapters. I've edited a book uh, on food safety, all of relevant topics about the science of food safety and how it's evolved.
Well, we are excited to have you here today to share some of that knowledge with us. And it's not because you are an old man. It's because you understood.
You're kind.
So let's talk. I want to kind of start with the definition of food safety. And so, like when we were prepping for this call, which people who've been on the show or who listen to the show, we do a little prep call, but we really want the show to be conversational. But one thing that you brought up to me is the definition of food safety, and a lot of times, many times, that people, even working in the food safety field, don't really understand the true definition of food safety.
Yeah.
And so I know you asked me what my definition was, and I can't remember exactly the way that I phrased it. But really, I was talking about what you called food safety assurance, and it really was from the manufacturing side of things. I would love for you to share your definition of food safety, and just so we can have a little conversation around that.
Yeah. So just just like you, I had some years ago. I was I was actually working on advancing and validating a novel preservation technology, and um, it occurred to me that there wasn't a succinct, um, readily available, mutually agreed
Mm,
definition of this thing called food safety. And so I thought about it for a while, and then it occurred to me that food safety was about the um, chemical, biological, physical status of a food that would allow its consumption without incurring an excessive risk of injury, morbidity, or mortality.
mhm.
So it's about risk.
Yeah,
And food, like all other human endeavors,
right.
involves some risk. And so then risk we accept can be normative.
Yeah.
Risk can also be political.
Hmm.
And risk is also manifest in corporate culture.
Hmm.
There are cowboys out there who are willing to take all kinds of risk with the food supply.
Yeah, that
But
is very true. That's very
yeah, but before I actually went on and published that definition that I gave you, I wasn't that courageous. So I called in Bob Buchanan and Don Zink and Martin Cole and Hugh Lelyveld and other folks that I've known and said, "Hey guys, what do you think about this?" And that was kind of my peer review. And
true.
when I had sign off from those guys, I was ready to go forward with it. And now the corollary to that is your definition, food safety assurance.
Yeah,
That's the science of understanding the risk in foods with the view towards mitigation.
right.
So that's food safety assurance. That's the science. The food safety is about the state of being.
Yeah,
It's about the food as it's put on your plate for you to eat it.
right. I
Right.
love your definition because it embodies from farm to table, right? It embodies the farmers and or you know the meat plants. It involves the production facilities, but it also involves the consumer, which is a huge missing piece from the food safety culture conversation, right? On how consumers think about food safety and how they consume food, and do they understand safe handling practices? And for someone that's worked in retail quite a bit, consumers are the one that's really driving retail and food service, where they're the ones that's opening the restaurants and starting a restaurant, a small restaurant in a small town, and handling food and figuring out temperature control and having conversations with their local health department. They really are setting up things based off of what they do in their own kitchens. And so I like your definition because it also ropes them in to say, as you're thinking about food, also thinking about food safety, the state of your food actually being safe.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. It's been a work in progress, but, but thank you. That's how I see it, and you're right. It to be effective, it has to involve all elements of the supply chain, the inbound supply chain and the outbound supply chain. They all need to be involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us a little more about how food safety has evolved over the years. You talked a little bit around, like, when you started, food safety wasn't even a thing. Talk to us about how it's evolved and what you see food safety like today.
Yes, so that's an interesting question, and I think I like history. I love history, as a matter of fact. And if perhaps had I understood that I could have afforded a family on a teacher's salary, I might have been a history teacher. But then I digress here. But so the first general food law in the United States of America, which the subtext reads food safety,
Mhm.
was passed in 1785 in the state of Massachusetts. So we had recently signed the Articles of Confederation, and you understand that the Constitution of the United States was not signed until 1788. So we the point here is that dodgy food, tainted food, food that contained substances that were profoundly injurious to the public health. People have been aware of this for a very long time. And that general food law in Massachusetts, is as good a starting point for the journey of food safety that I can think about. And so you're right. So we go from 1785, and then big breakthrough comes with 1906 and the passage in the United States, that is, of the Pure Food Act. Then it was modified in 1938. It was updated in 1958. But all the time, there was seldom any wording about food safety. Dr. Wiley and his group, the Poison Squad, they did talk about uh, food safety,
Mhm.
but it was kind of a nebulous proposition, as I understand and as I've researched it. They food fraud is a lot of what Dr. Wiley's work was focused on. But so then we come in the NASA program with Dr. Bauman in Pillsbury in the 50s when
Mhm.
HACCP is introduced.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, and so we go from the early 50s until 1986, when the GMP regulations of the United States under the FDCNA were updated, and the FDA, for the first time, included in regulatory language the notion of a critical control point.
Mm.
So we're evolving, but still uh, in that same update of the regulations, there is not mention of the word food safety.
Mm.
It's not uttered once. Um,
Interesting.
and at the same time, in the government, the federal government, at that time, the only two institutions with food safety in their title was the Food Safety Inspection Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at FDA.
Mm.
The universities had no curricula. The food companies, with the exception probably of Pillsbury, did not have an office, a budgeted unit that was dedicated to this proposition called food safety. It
Mm.
was done under the auspices of quality assurance. And because it was done under the auspices of quality assurance, it was destined to fail.
Mm.
And it was failing. So we had some horrific outbreaks. Um, um, we injured, killed, maimed people, and consumers demanded that we do better. The government demanded that we do better, and the industry has responded, and they responded uh, with putting food safety professionals in place within their corporate structure and giving them the visibility and the money that they need to do the work called food safety. So it's been a long journey, uh, but I mean, I even saw recently one of the land grant universities actually was offering a degree in food safety.
Mm.
So this is, this,
Solving.
yeah, it's progress. Things are changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that note that you said that food safety was rolled underneath this quality bucket, this quality assurance. And if you look at organizations right now, even large organizations, they still refer to food safety as quality. I remember starting my career and learning, food safety, learning quality assurance, quality control. Um, I've had the conversation multiple times to say there is a difference between quality and food safety.
Hmm.
And this is where we can play within both. And I remember having those conversations with, people in food safety and quality, people outside of it in the operations group, trying to help them understand the difference between their, HACCP checks and food safety checks versus their quality checks. Um,
Hmm.
so it's interesting that you say that, and you said that it was a big mistake.
It
Why
is.
do you think it was a big mistake for us to lump food safety underneath quality assurance? And what do you recommend organizations do now if they're still under the old umbrella of calling everyone quality?
Yeah. So let me put it uh, succinctly. Quality is negotiable.
Hmm.
We negotiate color, texture, weight, appearance, density, salt content. We negotiate those things in quality assurance. I had quality people reporting to me, so I
Hmm.
know what quality does. You measure the bricks, you measure the sugar content, and you measure color, and well, it's in the range, so it's acceptable,
Right.
right? Food safety is non-negotiable.
Hmm.
If it's not safe, it's not food.
Right. Yeah.
Plain and simple. And so quality assurance does the bidding of marketing, sales, and manufacturing. Food safety does the bidding of regulatory and public health.
Mhm.
So there's that whole spectrum that you talked about from farm to consumer,
Right.
because the focus of the work on food safety is making sure that at the point of service, that the risk of incurring incurring the excessive risk of injury, morbidity, or mortality does not occur.
Mm.
The skill sets, the skills, big point, the skills required for quality assurance are not the same skills that are required for food safety
Mm.
assurance.
Yeah.
Quality engineers. I mean, I've had classes in toxicology and hematology and parasitology and bacteriology and mycology and virology. Um, have your people in quality assurance had those classes, or have they had engineering, food science, and food science classes?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And for someone that has a background, in school that's not in food at all, so for me, I'm a chemical engineer by training, and so when I entered into the space, right, I have an engineering background, but food was new to me. And so it was important, and I was very grateful or lucky, I guess I would say, to have an organization where, or even a team that was able to explain the difference between food safety and quality. Even though at the time, um, we sort of called ourselves a quality team, or a lot of people will say QA, right, at the
Mhm.
facility. And our overall title was quality and regulatory operations. Um, but it was still underneath this quality umbrella. And then one thing that's really interesting, so people that know me know I started at General Mills and I started at a Pillsbury facility. And so we had all the traditional terms of HACCP, but it was really easy to refer to the team as QA, as quality. And so sometimes that was a little confusing to people on the floor because you had to explain the difference between, okay, this is food safety and this is why this is important, and this is quality where we can have a little bit more conversation. And in some ways, I felt like it was beneficial for the same people to be responsible for both, because then I could do that food safety side on like, hey, we have to do it this way. We have to do things a certain way to ensure the safe food, right? But I can wiggle a little bit over here where, like you said, color or density or something like that, or even the way that we do certain processes from a quality standpoint, you could make changes and cause some cost savings, right? And really think about that piece of it. So I was able to deliver this food safety side as well as this quality side. And so for the people that's listening and you're thinking about like, I have just a food safety team and just a quality team, or I have both, that, I have someone that does both, they definitely can work together as far as the person doing it. But
Mhm.
it's important for that person and for the organization, for the plant, for the facility to understand that there is a difference between food safety and quality.
Absolutely. And yes, so, to bridge the gap, I think that, Tia, this is, where the notion of culture, food safety culture, has a place. I mean, let's be clear on this. Food safety culture is aspirational, and
Hmm.
it's a big idea. And I guess that maybe at some point it will begin to be realized and appreciated. But companies right now, as evidenced by the ongoing number of outbreaks, companies now are still struggling with the blocking and tackling the fundamentals of food safety assurance. So, food safety culture is, again, is aspirational, But if it's realized, then that gap between quality and food safety assurance can be bridged under this umbrella called food safety culture, because then we understand that food safety is everybody's job,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so the quality man understands that he or she has a role in food safety assurance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the chief financial officer understands that she has a role in food safety assurance. The executive vice president of sales understands that
Right.
he has a role in food safety assurance. That's culture.
Right. Yeah.
All the way down to those people on the production floor who actually do real food safety.
Right.
None of these other people that I've mentioned actually do food safety. Food
Mm-hmm.
safety is done by the line workers. And until we understand that, we will never be successful with this big aspirational idea called food safety culture.
Right, exactly. That's one thing that we focus on at Catalyst, where we really target that middle manager that's responsible for setting a direction and strategy, but they really are responsible for influencing, um, motivating, and ensuring that there's engagement on the floor, right? Because, like you said, they're the executors. And so when you think about where organizations spend money on like leadership development and those professional skills and those leadership skills, a lot of times that money is skewed to the top on how do we get our executives coached, right? How do we make sure that our executives know how to have this executive presence and able to give presentations and able to represent the company well? And there's a place for it. But if you're also not investing in the people that are the boots on the ground, then, like you said, food safety culture is something that's out here, right? And that is going to be very hard for you to get there, because the people who are getting the leadership training opportunities, they're not the people that actually executing.
That's cool. That's how I see it. Uh, but again, I mean the idea. Um, I like the idea.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's good to have big ideas, and like I said, to me, the great benefit of that idea is that it bridges the expanse of a corporation and
Right.
puts food safety under an umbrella. Which reminds me, I have a food safety umbrella that I developed about 20 years ago. I should share with you sometime. But
Oh yes,
yeah,
I
yeah,
would. I would love to see that.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm curious. So, what have been the maybe one or two pivotal shifts during the food safety and professionals evolution that you would say have been the most impactful, that have moved food safety forward?
Yeah, so the big, I mean, unfortunately, every time that we have made some progress, the progress comes on the heels of calamity.
Mm,
The Roosevelt signing the Pure Food Law in 1906, came you know on the heels of some disaster. Uh, the Spanish American War. We killed. It's reported that we probably killed more troops with botulism than Spain killed with its armies.
wow.
So we got these laws passed. Rachel Carson shined a bright light in the '60s on chemical additives and the food supply, and we got some regulatory change, maybe a little bit too onerous with the Delaney clause, but nevertheless, we made some progress. But succinctly, I think we went. The big change to me is when I first came into the food industry. It was this is art, the culinary arts, and science, the culinary arts and science. And so you could go into a processing establishment and there was a lot of art, but not a lot of science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they were transferring what they thought grandma was doing in the kitchen to the production floor, and they were skipping some very significant steps. They
Yeah.
weren't using scientific methods.
Right.
We weren't talking about risk because we were talking about food. People don't want to talk. People don't want to have that real conversation that there is risk associated with foods.
Right. Yeah.
So with FISMA, the emphasis on risk is a big change.
Yeah.
That's a monumental mindset change for the food processing industry,
Mm-hmm.
and the demand for risk assessment when you've identified a critical control point uh, is a big step change. So we give credit to Dr. Bauman, and I'm glad that I got to meet Howard and learn that Howard liked the South American red wines as much as I did. So we had lots in common. We had great conversations, but HACCP is a big step, was a big step change.
Okay.
And just to show you, I mean, the pushback, I remember we had in my network, we had FSIS inspected plants, and I remember having conversations with the veterinarians, and they were all afraid of HACCP because they thought they were going to lose their jobs. They thought that with HACCP, with better controlled, focused inspection, that wouldn't be the need for all the veterinarians that the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So they pushed back, and so you'll see on the meat side, even to this day, there's little or no talk about HACCP.
Interesting.
Right? Think about it. On that side, there's little or no conversation about HACCP. Now, they come to understand preventive controls and
Right.
all of that other language, but they're not talking about HACCP.
Interesting.
So then likewise, we've only had HACCP for seafood. We only had HACCP for juice, and well, again, we had a catastrophe. We
Mm-hmm.
had people killed, and so we got those HACCP regulations, and then finally with FISMA, and I don't know why we had to change the name or rebrand it, but I've chatted friends at the FDA and said, hey, Mike and Jenny, you rebranded HACCP to HARP C because if you went out across the industry in the time when HACCP was voluntary, everybody developed HACCP,
Right. Yeah.
but it was not uniform. It was subject to the interpretation of the QA, QC, or food safety person who went to a training seminar put on by Larry Keener and went back to the company and said, "Well, we have HACCP."
Mm-hmm.
Well, did they? How rigorous was the risk assessment? How well did they identify the significant organisms? How robust were their strategies for mitigation? Well,
Yeah.
it was very subjective. So that to me has been the big change. I think the FISMA. I think they've done a pretty good job with that for human foods. I think they had that
Mm.
headed in the right direction. They tried with the PQCI. Well, that that's a conversation for another time. But they tried,
Yeah.
and I think they went back and they looked at the requirement for a process authority under 21 CFR 113 or 108.25 and said this is this is a good model, and they tried. And then some people made money teaching PQCI classes, and we now have a whole bunch of food safety experts out there who've been to training for a week.
Mhm.
Like I said, that's a conversation for another time. Um, but yeah, those. I mean, so those are the changes. But and again, the predicate change has occurred on the heels of catastrophe
Right.
when we've harmed and killed people.
Right.
And I would prefer that prefer that we found a more suitable method, a more suitable pathway forward.
Right. Exactly. That we truly become preventive versus reactionary. Right.
Yes,
And
well
so,
said.
so thinking about those things and where we've come and we've been having FISMA for what a decade, a little over a decade now,
2011. Yeah.
2011. So what would you say is critical for us as food safety professionals to do going forward so we can continue to see this progress, or for us to really get more preventative versus reactionary?
It's a big. It's that. That's a big ask, Tia,
Yeah, it is.
because food safety in the first instance is dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw the infant formula catastrophe
Mm-hmm.
with Coronabacter sakazai. Yeah, I remember when we first characterized that organism, right? I remember when I was a student at Cal, and we discussed listeria.
Mm-hmm.
We had veterinarians come in and explain to us um, Listeria monocytogenes and its impact on cattle.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, Listeria, believe it or not, Gia, was not confirmed human pathogen.
Really?
So food safety is dynamic. It's
Yeah.
always changing. So now that we know that C. Sakazaki or E. Sakazaki, as it was originally called, is out there, it's in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not stuck in the infant formula plants. It's in other food plants too.
Right.
What are we gonna do about it? That's the kind of mindset we need to have. We need to be visionaries. When we get these signals, we need to investigate them. We need to study them. We need to remove all ambiguity and put plans together that will anticipate uh,
Right.
this organism. Um, it's exacerbated now by climate change.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing manifestations in the bacteria in the microbiological world. We're seeing strange things happen. Um, Organisms popping up in regions of the world where they had heretofore had not been problematic.
Right. Yeah.
Proliferation of parasites in fish, which you know across the town here at University of Washington, researchers published a very significant paper on the explosion of parasites in fish that we use for food.
Wow.
Then, but beyond climate change, the other thing that is challenging the food safety scientists is the explosion of the human population. It's
Mm-hmm.
projected that by 2050 we will have some 10 billion mouths to feed on
Ooh.
this planet.
Yeah.
10 billion people will need food, and more importantly, 10 million people who will need water,
Mm-hmm.
clean, safe water. So these are challenges. We need water for agriculture, and we know that, or it's suspected that in the leafy greens we're having problems with E. coli again
Mm-hmm.
because of the agricultural water being contaminated with animal excrement.
Right.
Um, so, so we have some challenges, and we really need to hunker down and do our homework and do the best that we can in playing this game of anticipation.
Right.
Then
Yeah.
with anticipation, we can go into preventive mode.
Right.
But
So these are, and I like looking at these issues because it really puts in perspective that the work that we're doing every day in food safety is like, it's so important. It's important for really the livelihood, right, of human beings on earth, or even if you think about food safety, even for animals, right? Um, we have a huge role on our shoulders, right? Um, as we're talking to professionals right now that's either responsible for food safety within their facility or at their company, what would you recommend to them that they do when there's an outbreak, and you talk about, like, we need to study it, we need to understand, and we need to make sure that we prevent it, right? Now that we have this information, how do we stop it from happening again? What do you recommend that this professional that's listening in, that has one location, or maybe has 5 locations in the organization, what would you recommend that they do to help influence the organization to take food safety seriously, and to put more resources towards it, and to really learn some things that's happening in the industry to be a part of this path of prevention?
yes, good question. Good question. So, uh, yeah, I think there might be some people listening here who heard me say over the years in characterizing what I do. I tell people that I'm first and foremost a technical businessman. I use my technical scientific training to solve business problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so when you go to your CEO or your leadership team and you position yourself as a technical business person, as opposed to a microbiologist, as opposed to a quality assurance manager, uh, the people in the C suite will listen to you.
Mm.
And when you can talk to them about dollars and cents,
Mhm.
and when you can talk to them about asset utilization, and when you can talk to them about uh, roll throughput and the impact of food safety on production, the case count at the end of the line, that you don't have to resort and reshuffle to try and figure out whether it's safe. Uh, and when you can talk to them about understanding inventory cost, holding food because you suspect that there's something wrong with it.
Mhm.
So this is what I suggest for the practitioner that you've described: is understand your role in delivering on bottom line expectations for your business unit or for your company. Become a technical business person.
Mm. Mm.
Right?
Really good advice.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I like that viewpoint too, because we honestly should be, right? Like, being in an organization, um, those business attributes should be important to us, just like food safety should be important to all of us. It helps us speak a common language.
Well, I love to ask. I mean, I often ask it. I'm at conferences and I know that I got a bunch of food safety people in the room, and I ask them, how many of you have manufacturing jobs? And most of them will keep their hands down. And then I ask them, how many of you work for food manufacturing companies? And they all put their hands up. And then they get what I'm saying.
Right.
But
Right.
they don't. When you understand that you work in manufacturing, food safety is about food manufacturing
Hmm.
by and large.
Right.
And once you understand that, you change your conversation. The people in operations will will give you a better audience. The people in finance will give you a better offer, a better hearing. The CEO will give you a better hearing. And I know I'm not. This isn't hypothetical for me. I've traveled that ground.
Yeah.
I had to learn to become a technical business person to be successful uh, as a director of food safety and regulatory affairs for one of the biggest multinational food companies on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not folly. It's for real.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, I was just having this conversation with someone around their quality and operations team button heads, right? And one of the things that we one of the things that we really talked about was that, everyone should have a common goal, the same goal when you're working in manufacturing, when you're working for a food manufacturing company. And that's to produce and ship out, right? Safe quality food. And all of us are trying to do that.
You
And
should be.
should be, right? And when you talk with your operations team and you have the conversation around, like, I too want to ship out cases. If
Mm-hmm.
cases aren't going out the door, then I'm not getting paid, right? You
Right.
know, the company's not going to have money for us to pay me, even, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
even if I look at it from a selfish standpoint, for me to have a job, we have to get cases out the door.
Right. We're not creating shareholder value. And you
Exactly.
gotta get it out the door.
We have to get it out the door.
Yeah.
Now, what we all should care about, and I remember having this conversation specifically around when I was in a meal kit business, and I would tell my team on the floor is that, we want the cases to go out the door. We want to make sure that people get their meals, but we are not in the business of selling them one meal. We're in the process of selling them multiple meals over multiple weeks until the end, right? Like,
Yes.
that's the business we're in. We're not in the business of selling one yogurt cup or, one salad or whatever it happens to be. We want people to continue coming back and to buy. So we have to make sure, that they are living after they eat our product, right? That they're
Yes.
kicking and that they feel healthy and that they're not getting sick. And then we have to make sure that it's up to quality standards. If
Mm-hmm.
you and I don't care about those things, then it doesn't matter about the cases going out the door because we can't sell them.
Yes.
And so once everyone gets on the same page of that's what we're trying to do, because to your point, we all work for this food manufacturing company, things start to click and make sense. Where
Mm-hmm.
it's like we're making this decision so that when someone buys it, they're going to come back and buy our product again.
Right. And so when you take that mindset and you have to have those very heavy conversations with your leadership team about something having gone wrong, they're open to listen because they understand that you understand what the company is about.
Right.
So the other thing is um, we're not selling food safety. You
Mm-hmm.
don't, the companies, Unilever wasn't selling food safety. Unilever was selling ice cream and syrup and pasta sauce and tea and
Yeah.
mayonnaise. We weren't selling food safety, but in fact we are. It's
Mm-hmm.
part and parcel of every jar, package, parcel of food that goes out the door.
Yeah.
But that's not important to the consumer. The consumer doesn't know. The consumer doesn't know anything about Larry Keener.
Right.
They have no idea. I mean, I take my daughters. They're young. I was an old man when I started having children, but I take my daughters into the supermarket and I can show them on every aisle in the supermarkets products that I've had involvement with.
Mm-hmm.
And but consumers don't know that. They
Right.
have an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
They have an expectation, and my role, your role as a food safety scientist, is to fulfill that expectation for your corporation.
Right. Exactly. Okay, we have about 10 minutes. And
Okay.
so I want to talk a little bit about this concept of culture. in diversity. So people know, like if you know me, if you've heard me, I started a group called the Black Professionals in Food Safety and Quality, and our goal is to really help build the pipeline of particularly Black talent. And we know that this is an issue in all industries, because there's a recent survey from McKinsey in 2020. They did a survey that showed that only 7% of managers are Black. And as you go up in promotions, that number gets even smaller. When you look at the number of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, there's only 5 Black CEOs. And so there's a pipeline issue around Black talent. But when you look at other races, you'll also see that there are pipeline talent issue as well. And so I think that this is really relevant when we talk about culture and food safety culture, because in order for you to create a sense of culture or a sense of community, right, we have to all be able to interact with one another and understand one another and, um, you know, uh, figure out what motivates each of us. And in reality, that comes from our own personal culture, how we're raised, our backgrounds, and so forth. So I'm curious to hear your perspective, especially being a Black professional in food safety and quality and being in the industry for so long. How do you think diversity of particularly race plays a part into building this food safety culture?
It plays a big role, and it will. I mean, it's of a magnitude that it has the ability to make or break efforts at um, building true food safety culture.
Yeah.
It, so I noted not too long ago that if you go out into the food industry, and it's not just limited to our industry, but the plantation model is used in the manufacturing industry across the country. So what that means is you go out on the production floor and you see brown and black and yellow faces. Uh, point point in fact is if you go back to the pandemic and the onset of the pandemic, and we had all of these big factories, and we were worried about frontline workers, and well, all of those frontline workers were, as I said, they were brown and black and yellow people.
Hmm.
Um, and well, then their supervisors, managers, and leadership tend to be white people and or people of European descent. I hate the word white people. People of European descent, and then so we then have this communication uh, issue. If we've got a big brown population of workers from Central America, from Guatemala, Nicaragua, Mexico. So then that means that we need to be able to speak Spanish to understand and communicate our expectations to these people. And that isn't always the case. We do the best we can. So then if we're talking about building culture, the bedrock of food safety culture, I suggest, is these line workers. We need to be able to enroll them. We need to we need to enroll them in language that they understand, language that they're culturally familiar with, language that they are comfortable with. that language that makes them want to embrace the notion of culture. But the bigger thing about food safety culture and the challenge, I think most people um, need to understand that corporate culture supersedes food safety culture every day. Corporate culture will trump food safety culture anytime.
Mm.
Corporate culture is the prerogative of the CEO. Most big corporations have a change in CEO at about every 5 years.
Mm.
So that next CEO coming in wants to put his or her stamp on the company. That stamp is called culture.
Right.
So we're in this idea called food safety culture. I think many believe that it's a bolt on. You can just go in and modify the CEO's culture. You can just bolt food safety culture onto it.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know necessarily that I subscribe to that. I
Yeah.
don't know necessarily that I believe that. And Tia, then the real challenge is getting, if the CEO is amenable, getting culture from the C-suite all the way down to the production floor
Hmm.
is a challenge.
Yeah.
And when there's a disconnect or when people are left out, you don't have culture,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a really good point. You're really talking about that food safety, food safety and food safety culture is not out by itself. It really is integrated into the way the business gets work done, the way that they talk every day, the way that they make decisions. Food safety is a part of that. And it's in every function of the organization, from
should be.
sales to marketing, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
From operations um to finance, right? Like food safety really should be integrated into the organization in order for it to be a true culture, because like exactly what you're saying, it becomes a part of that corporate culture because it's now embedded in the organization.
Correct.
Understanding your people, including and most importantly the frontline people, is key.
Absolutely. But I don't want to get away from the pipeline issue that you raised because it's as long as I've been in the industry, the HR people have always said that we can't find black people. Oh, we can't find brown people. And I asked, where you looking? And so they go and say, well, we're looking at Penn State, we're looking at Michigan State, we're looking at Ohio State, we're looking at, up in Massachusetts, and we're looking at Purdue. And well, said, well, I mean, it doesn't take very much research to find out that in these PWIs, there aren't a lot of black folk. I mean, I think about how lonesome it was for me at Cal. I mean, being essentially the only African American student in the program.
Yeah.
So if the HR people aren't willing to do the research to try and find out where the resources are available. Now, yeah, let's use an analogy. What if the CEO responsible for procurement needs an ingredient,
Mm.
and he just goes back to the supplier that he's familiar with, and that supplier says, "Well, we're out, so we're just going to stop the business."
Right.
Or are we going to do our research and understand the market and find out where there are alternative sources of
Right.
that raw material?
Right.
It's
Exactly.
the same way with the human. So I've said, well, then you better go to Tuskegee University, or you better go to other of the HBCUs. And I
Mhm.
have a bias for Tuskegee. It's personal because because I love George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington and what they did for our ancestors. But so you need to be able to get in there with the HR people and direct them. I mean, be straight up with them and tell them that if you've got a pipeline issue, you've got your pipeline focused in the wrong, projected into the wrong place because there are people available.
Right, absolutely. And the reason why I started the Black Professionals Group.
Mm-hmm.
So Larry, we really enjoyed you being on the show today. Thank you so much. I do want to have our speed question round. I know we're right at the hour, but take a few minutes.
Yeah,
So who's the funniest person you know?
Richard Pryor.
Right, is the funniest person. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Where would you love to go on vacation?
The Solomon Islands.
Ooh, Solomon Islands. Okay, I'm gonna have to look them up and put them on my
A
list.
bunch of black people in the Pacific Ocean down off of Australia next to Papua New Guinea. It's a
Oh,
whole archipelago of islands populated by black people, and I just it's been since I was 6 or 7 years old. It's a place that I wanted to go because I wanted to understand how they got there.
right, right. Interesting. Okay. What is a book we should all add to our reading list?
The Poison Squad.
Poison Squad.
Poison Squad is the detail of. I'm reading it right now.
Okay.
Deborah Blum. It's the history of food safety, the history of the Food and Drug Administration.
Oh, nice.
And then for you young folks who haven't read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, you should add that to your reading list.
Okay. And what would people say is your superpower?
X-ray vision.
X-ray vision.
I can see through the stuff, Tia.
That's awesome. That is awesome. That's awesome. Well, Larry, I appreciate you being on the show. There's so much to talk about and so much to learn from. And I just want to thank you for sharing your experience and sharing your passion around history, and really thinking about history and how that's impacting today and what we should learn from it in order to have a better tomorrow. So thank you for coming to Real Talk Food Safety. And for the people that are listening on replay, we have all of our replay videos up on our YouTube channel. So check us out. And we will be back next week on LinkedIn, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tia.